called Fiddler on the Roof takes place in a village called Anatevka. It is located in an area known at that time as the Pale of Settlement. My grandparents arrived in America in the late 1890s, around the same time as the Fiddler story, from towns in or around the Pale. Judaism is a religion, and Jews have lived in many places around the world. We also consider ourselves an ethnic group, and some customs and foods may vary from country to country. But the traditions that we share are the intrinsic values of the commandments, stories, and teachings often found in holiday observances. My grandparents spoke Yiddish when they arrived in America. They learned to speak English as well. The Yiddish word for grandmother is Bubby, and grandfather is Zeta. The family story about my maternal grandparents is that my Bubby was the daughter of a poor tailor, and my Zeta came from a wealthy family in the same town. We never knew if they met here in the United States or in the old country, but they had 7 children and held hands until they were old, and my grandmother became ill. My paternal grandparents were an arranged marriage here in the U.S. My Zeta was born in Vilnius, which was part of Tsarist Russia at that time. The family story is that he swam a river to escape being inducted into the Tsar's army. Young Jewish males were often abused and sent to the front lines to be used as cannon fodder. He escaped and came to the United States. He owned a shoe store in Brooklyn, and after recovering from a life-threatening illness, was a very observant Jew. I still remember the sukkah he built in the brick courtyard in the back of his store for the festival of Sukkot. I was born in Brooklyn, surrounded by many Jewish relatives. My family moved to Long Island when I was 7. There is a Jewish mystical tradition which teaches that every child, Jew or non-Jew, is born with a spark from the divine light. We can grow or diminish that light because we were also given free will, the freedom to choose. In Judaism, there are many commandments and teachings to guide us in deciding which path we choose. My grandmothers all lit candles on the Sabbath, as we are commanded to do. My mother did as well. I remember my mother lighting the candles and saying the blessings on Friday nights. It is a tradition I have tried to keep as well. It was a tradition to serve chicken soup on the Shabbat. I also remember, just to add here, stories, because it was a tradition to feed the hungry on the Sabbath. My mother saying that her mother would invite a beggar or someone less fortunate to come and share a Sabbath meal with them. And I remember my aunt, my father's sister, telling me a story, remembering her mother's hands smoothing the white Sabbath tablecloth when they lit the candles and when they invited orphans to come and share a Sabbath meal with them. So that was a tradition. I didn't hear much about it, but it makes me very proud that it happened. Gal Gadot, the Israeli actress who plays Wonder Woman in the most recent movie version, posted a beautiful photo online of herself lighting Shabbat candles with her youngest daughter. It was a powerful message. We share a love of freedom, justice, and goodness with the heroic fictional character, and Judaism teaches that we are, quote, all created in the image of God, and human life is therefore sacrosanct. One rabbi describes the Shabbat as a temporary anti-reality of perfection. All things are seen through the eyes of love, as if all of nature were perfect, in harmony with itself and humanity. The Sabbath was given to mankind in remembrance of creation, and creation is a process of renewal. Keeping that in mind, perhaps some peace can be found, bringing light into a dark world. My family always observed Passover as well. When I was young, my maternal Bubby always made a Seder in their small apartment in Brooklyn. We filled the dining room with aunts, uncles, and cousins and delicious food. When my grandparents were older, my parents made the Seder at our house on Long Island. My husband and I made Seders in our house in Fredonia when our children were growing up. My brother and his family and my mother would come from Long Island to join us. In recent decades, as children have grown and moved away, we have held community Seders here at Temple. On Passover, the story of the ancient Israelites' redemption from slavery to freedom is recounted. We dip parsley in salt water to remember the tears our ancestors shed while serving as slaves. We taste a bitter herb, usually horseradish, to remember the bitterness of slavery. There is also a tradition of pouring out a drop of wine for each of the 10 plagues visited upon the Egyptians. A full cup of wine is a symbol of complete happiness. We diminish the wine in the cup because our happiness cannot be complete if others had to die so we could be free, even those who would persecute us. So we follow our traditions by telling our stories to our children and children's children, and passing on the values inherent in God's commandments and teaching. The traditions teach compassion and empathy. In the mid-1980s, I was asked to teach Sunday school here at Temple Bethel. I taught the youngest class. I used to write short stories for the children to perform at holiday times. It was a way to carry on the traditions, tell our stories, and celebrate with songs and music. The education of children, the passing on of values, moral and spiritual, is an intrinsic obligation of parenting. There is an old Jewish tradition of placing a little honey on the cover of a child's school book to sweeten the learning as he or she begins their religious education. I was asked to examine traditions of caring within Judaism that might lend strength or comfort to victims of child abuse. While warmth and kindness can be found in a bowl of chicken soup, there are no easy remedies for victims. It is written in Jewish law that the parents have the primary obligation to protect the rights of their children, which include the right to life, dignity, and freedom, and also to provide the skills to survive natural dangers, as well as to earn a living and be self-sustaining. If the parents are unable to do all of this, it becomes the community's responsibility. Children are considered to be a gift from God, guarantors of our inheritance. And orphans are endowed with every one of these rights as well. During World War II, about 6 million Jewish persons, approximately 1.5 million of whom were children, were murdered in the Holocaust, the Nazis' final solution to what they called the Jewish problem. It was a policy based on so-called racial identity to exterminate a specific world population they deemed a, quote, biological enemy not worthy of life. There is a remarkable book written by a 90-year-old woman, a renowned psychologist who was a teenager during the Holocaust. It has a powerful message for survivors of abuse. The Choice, Embrace the Possible, is a memoir written by Dr. Edith Eva Eger. At the age of 18, Edith Eger, who was a trained ballet dancer and gymnast, was sent to Auschwitz. Hours after her parents were sent to the gas chamber, the angel of death, Nazi officer Dr. Joseph Mengele, forced Edie to dance for his amusement and her survival. He rewarded her with a loaf of bread that she shared with her fellow prisoners, an act of generosity that would later save her life. Edie and her sister survived multiple death camps and the Death March. When the American troops liberated the camps in 1945, they found Edie barely alive in a pile of corpses. She spent decades struggling with flashbacks and survivor's guilt. She tried to stay silent and hide from the past. She raised a family, studied and practiced psychology, and refused to speak about her experiences during the war. 35 years after the war ended, Edie returned to Auschwitz and was finally able to fully heal and forgive the one person she'd been unable to forgive for years. Not Hitler, not Joseph Mengele, but herself. When the law was given to Moses and the Israelites on Mount Sinai, it was revealed to all mankind that God asks of man that he choose life. Perhaps that is our greatest tradition. We survive and still seek to do good.